start off, I just want to ask if you could give an overview of the impacts, the benefits of AI for SMEs in today's world.
That's a very good place to start, actually. And I'll look at that from two perspectives. The first perspective is what does the current landscape look like in terms
Mm,
of SMEs' use of artificial intelligence? And what we understand from research is that SMEs do not use AI as much as they could. Now, for example, I just read a study that came out in January this year. I came across it a couple of weeks ago, and it was done in the US. Okay, some of the biggest names and some of the biggest organizations driving the AI revolution are based in the US. So you can imagine when we say US. So this study collected data they mailed their surveys to more than 800,000 businesses in the
that's
US.
good.
And that includes a large share. I mean, just by that number, you would know it includes a fair share of businesses of all sizes, from one employee businesses, sole proprietorship, to businesses with more than 10,000 employees. Around 580,000 of them responded to the survey. And then they showed in that survey that less than 10% of businesses with fewer than 50 employees were using AI. Now, if you jump to the 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 employee band, the rate of adoption triples to about 30%.
Mm,
And it doubles again when you go above the 5,000, 7,000, 10,000 employee mark.
mm,
Okay, so if one would plot a chart of AI adoption by firm size, by the number of employees in a company, you will see that the larger the company, the higher the rate of AI adoption, which says that something is not quite right on the lower end of the spectrum when you look at AI adoption by firm size. So here's where the problem is for
great.
developing countries, a country like Nigeria, countries in Africa and other parts of the world. Now, the model firm in Nigeria, for example, has less than 5 employees. Now,
Yeah,
by model firm, I'm talking of the most common
yeah,
size
yeah. That's
employee
what
that
we
you will
see
find
commonly.
around. That's what we
Yeah,
see, fewer than 5 employees. In fact, there was some statistics, quite old now, about 2010, that said that more than 90% of Nigerian firms were micro-sized, fewer than
yeah,
5 employees, in fact.
yeah.
And a large majority of them die within the
Five
first.
years.
But at
Yeah.
the same time, there is also research that says that even though the rate of obsolescence, the rate of exit of these firms are high, the ones that have better capabilities to use technologies or that use it more tend to grow faster and to survive more.
Now, I found a few things interesting in your narrative, and one of them is the fact that there seems to be huge potentials, but then why are they not using it? And when we look at it across developing countries, let's say global south and global north, for instance, it looks like the rate of adoption is really not very significant in terms of difference. What do you think is responsible for this? One, why are SMEs not using it? And why is it that the rate of adoption across these broad regions are seemingly not
Mm,
different?
not as high. Yeah. Three things actually. Off the top of my head, I can mention three things. If we had all day, we can then talk a lot more
Drill down.
about more details and many more
Okay,
factors.
great.
I think perhaps the biggest of the, let's call them hurdles. I
Great.
think the biggest of that will be capacity or competence. To a very large extent, it's one thing to be aware of the technology, it's another thing to be able to use it in a way that is meaningful business wise.
Great.
And That then leads me to the question of awareness and access, which I think is a real problem. And then you have the problem of infrastructure.
Mm,
Now, when I talk about infrastructure, I'm talking about things like electricity. A lot of businesses struggle to provide electricity to make their businesses run. And so, thinking about using a new state of the art technologies like artificial intelligence for them is a luxury they cannot afford. And then, if you also consider that in many developing countries, uh, internet connectivity is exceedingly expensive, more expensive than you would expect it to be. And the reality is that using AI tools is data heavy. And then the final hurdle is the lack of demand for it. This is why, for example, in the service sector in some developing countries, the quality of service is very poor, but the
mm,
customers don't complain. Because
mm.
over time, the quality of service has become, I mean, poor quality service has become the norm. Now,
So
the
they are
more
used to it.
sophisticated, we're used to it. So the more sophisticated the market is, the more they put service providers, technology providers,
And they are afraid.
producers on their toes to always want to do better.
Now, well, one other thing that I mean jumped at me as you were speaking is can we go a bit granular? What are these specific artificial intelligence tools that are available, readily available to these SMEs that this seems not to be using or exploring? So can we deconstruct these
Mm.
phrases and let's see if we can make more meaning?
Yeah. I mean, the very notion of artificial intelligence is simply, trying to mimic with machines the zenith of intelligence that the human mind has. And each different technology has is at a different level in terms of, reaching to the possible peak. Large language models, generative AI, are some of these that before now you would search for knowledge using Google, and then you just type in something, it gives you results. You cannot interrogate those results. Tools like ChatGPT, like Google Bard, which is now Google Gemini, makes that conversational. They have that conversational capacity. And one very mundane example of how businesses could make use of that, which I don't see many businesses doing yet, is to ask questions around what could be the frontiers of their business. Ask questions around what might people need, what are the major problems. Because you see, the data that these tools can process is very, very massive. So they can, I mean, a small business doesn't have to spend so much on market research anymore. This
Anymore, yeah.
can easily do it. Marketing becomes really, really easy from the perspective of product placement. Before now, you would have to hire an expert graphics designer to design maybe a small business flyer for you. A small business doesn't necessarily need to do that. All you need is a free Canva account. So
Yeah.
I mean, and then it has artificial intelligence capabilities embedded within it that you can generate images from text, okay, and then do fanciful things. Music can be created. You know, I remember
Art.
a couple of days back we had a webinar, and I wouldn't call myself an expert editor, but on my LinkedIn profile, I was able to use an AI enabled tool embedded within Microsoft Office 365 to cut out a 3-minute clip out of a 2-hour video recording. And then, as I was cutting out the clip and rendering it, it was buffering. I instructed the tool to generate using AI, which is embedded, by the way, to generate an auto caption. And as it was generating, I was able to live edit the caption. So as I'm speaking now, the tool could simply just be transcribing what I'm saying, and you see it on the screen. It gives you a panel on the side where you can live edit that, make corrections, remove all the filler words and ums and ahs, and then you have a nice closed captioned video. I put that on my LinkedIn profile as part of the takeaway from that event. These are the kinds of possibilities that now exist, including, I'm talking of even the very mundane things, bookkeeping, inventory
Yeah.
management. There are tools that do all of these things, at the snap of the finger. There are those who argue that these tools are not perfect. That's correct. And the truth is, the human mind itself is not perfect. And
Yeah.
remember that these things are mimicking the human mind, so they will mimic all of the imperfections as well. And more so, at the point we were all children, we thought like children, we behaved like children. So think about these tools as baby humans. They will make all of the mistakes that a baby mind will make. They are not perfect, yes, but they are phenomenal in how much productivity enhancements they bring.
Well, that's interesting. So it appears that this tool seems to be at the fingertips of the small business owners, but they seems not to be aware, or they seems not to be exploring or making use of it. So how can we bridge this gap? How do you think we could get them to see the benefit and to use it responsibly? What do
Mm.
you think we need to start doing?
That's a very important question that also has its challenges. Um, but I think the starting point, really, and this is true, irrespective of the size of businesses that we're talking about, but particularly true in the case of SMEs. The cliche that we refer to as the town and gown relationship, I think is very, very crucial. For example, and I'm sure you would
Can you
know this.
explain that? Power and gown.
Yes, I was going there. I mean, you would know this. Recently, the Federal Ministry of Communication, Innovation, and Digital Economy in Nigeria launched a series of programs. One of those programs is focused explicitly on the agricultural sector, and they made a call for researchers in the universities and research institutes who are doing things with AI that could enhance agricultural productivity to put up a proposal. I'm aware that they've selected a number of projects now. So the idea behind those projects is to match researchers with small businesses in the
Mm.
agricultural sector.
Mhm.
So the researchers will be the brain behind the technology, and then the businesses will provide the field to test it out, to prototype.
That
So this
sounds
is what I mean
innovative.
by the town and gown. So let's think about the gown as the university, the ivory tower where knowledge is produced. And then the town is the rest of us, the market, the small
Mm.
businesses, and all of that. So finding that relationship, I think, is very crucial, because no matter how we think about it, from my experience working in different countries in Africa, I do know that most of the knowledge production that takes place happens in the universities. There's very little research that takes place in the private sector. There is some, but very little. So if we want the
Can
private
I
sector,
can I just interrupt you there?
yes, no, no problem.
And that is about I don't know because I beg to differ. It doesn't look like the universities are, especially when we're looking at the universities in developing countries, Nigeria specifically. It doesn't look like they are the one producing this knowledge because they are not. It's not how they are. It looks like most
Mm,
of the knowledge and innovation we see today are from the businesses, large businesses, because they also seems to have money and funds and all that to access some of this technology
mm,
and create hubs here and there, get people to do stuff. Whereas in the university, for instance, striking is the order of the day. People are not even when the lab is there, things just
right.
gather dust and all. I know this seems to be veering off our conversation. But when you say that it looks like the university is where knowledge is being produced, I think that might be true, but it doesn't really look like it. It doesn't look like we have
Mhm,
substantial evidence to say that. And I think that's the reason why a number of these small businesses don't really look at our universities, our higher education sector as stakeholders that have something substantial to bring to
mm,
the table when it comes to collaboration. And I don't really want to generalize. I'm not saying that there are no few that's
Mhm.
exceptions, that are not. But it looks like generally it doesn't come across to someone that these universities really, really are the one
No,
producing these
I
students.
can. What you are scared of, I am not scared of. I can generalize. I can generalize. And I can
Okay.
tell you, seriously, I can tell you that most of the knowledge is produced in the ivory tower, universities, research institutes. Now, let me
Really?
explain that. Now, you see,
Mm-mm.
what happens in the private sector is what people who study the economics of science will refer to as applied research, or if you like, you call it development. So we already know the problem we want to solve, and all the investments we are going to make, all the efforts we are going to put is into solving this problem. And once we solve that problem, full stop. In fact, it is so bad in the private sector that if you run a company, I run a company, you invest in research, you solve a problem, you don't even want me to have access to that knowledge. All
Yeah.
right. This is
Yeah.
where the notion of patents came from.
Yeah.
This is exactly what, the premise for patents. Now, because a lot of research that happens in the university is not like that, they are mostly, in many cases, basic research, especially where facilities are not available in many developing countries. So a lot of people just do the basic research. Believe me, some of the applied research that we see in the private sector is built upon, even though nobody acknowledges this and we don't see it, is built upon the basic research that is already done in some university or some polytechnic that somebody just puts in a
Wow.
paper without thinking about it. It happens more often than not. But because these things cannot be traced, they cannot be tracked. Okay, we only look at it from the market perspective when we
Yeah.
see
The
a new
output.
product on the market that is driven by knowledge, and that knowledge, the applied research has been done in the private sector.
But
Again,
we really need to look at this. I think that it's really not doing the universities is doing them a disservice, honestly.
no, I agree with you. I
Not
think
to
they are
be
not doing
able
well
to
generally.
link,
Yeah,
yeah, to link the output from the universities in terms of research and innovation to the final output that
that's
these
correct.
businesses are generating. I mean, there should be some reference, because what you see generally is the notion that the university are not really doing anything, or they are not doing as much as they should um have done. So,
Mm.
wow, interesting conversation. I think we can go on, but our time seems to be fast spent.
Yes,
And I want to say that we might really have to come back for another.
I believe we should. I believe we should, because we should also be talking. I mean, apart from just the town and gown relationship, we should also be talking about policies and incentives
Yes.
to.
I think we should come back and look at AI policy generally as it influences small businesses. Specifically, let's look at Nigeria. I think it will be interesting to start from home.
It definitely will be. It will be. It
So
will be.
let's just have a conversation around how
It
AI
will be.
policies is influencing. That is, even if we have any AI policy at all, or if whatever we're doing right now, what
No, at the
how
moment
it
we
is.
don't have. At the moment we don't have. I know that the Ministry of Communication is making efforts. There, last week I think they had an inception meeting, or was it a workshop of the experts they have brought together to
Yeah,
develop
I
an
saw
AI
that on
policy
LinkedIn too.
for Nigeria. Um, Again, if I would comment
That's
on that, it's not.
commendable anyway.
It is indeed. It is indeed. But we need to be careful with some of these things, because the intention is good, but there's a tendency that the output might just be disconnected from the local realities. Policy making is a very delicate game, so to say. You can't do everything at the same time, but it's also quite important to get it right if you are going to do it the first time. But to be honest, that doesn't take anything. That's just my own observation. It doesn't take anything away from the effort. The thinking
Yeah,
behind it is top class.
I thought, I mean, I've not been following that very closely, but I felt that they've got a wide mix of personnel, individuals within that that cohort, that group that seems to be brainstorming on the AI policy. I don't want to believe that it's only people from the universities, or so we might just want to see what they're doing
Yeah,
and
we will.
keep
We will.
having this conversation. I think the next time we meet, we'll want to talk about the ethical implications of the use of generative AIs for small businesses in Nigeria or developing country as a whole. Thank you so much, Dr. Egbetokun. It's really been an interesting conversation. I don't know if you have any parting words before we go.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost everything we have said so far is like a parting word if we had stopped there. But I think one important point to make is that we are now in a world that is heavily influenced by AI. These tools
Yeah.
are already here, they're not going anywhere. So the earlier we all got on board and start reskilling and upskilling, the better for all of us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Egbetokun. And to everyone listening to us or watching this episode, I want to say thank you so much. And until we meet again on another episode of AIization, this is Debo Wosheni saying thank you for watching and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.